Welcome to another RTR production of Respond to Racism's monthly community meeting for September 11th, 2023. Today's speaker is Bruce Poinsette. Bruce is a writer and community organizer whose work is primarily based in the Portland Metro Area. This event seeks to spotlight the experiences of alumni and former students of color from Lake Oswego schools. Life After the Bubble will feature interviews from various students, each sharing distinct cultural experiences and reflections from their time in Lake Oswego. The meeting will incorporate clips from those interviews and will culminate in a facilitated discussion.
I want to thank, first of all, the people who carried the load over the summer. We have not had a community meeting since June, and so we're here tonight and moving forward with our community. We need to be together, and to be in person again is such a great thing, and I'm really happy. Thanks to all of you who supported our activities. Juneteenth, we had a celebration in spite of the storm. And did it rain? It rained, rain. But we stood our grounds and said, we are going to celebrate Juneteenth. And also, that was the day that they dedicated the mural. And I hope if you've not seen the mural, there is a beautiful, the artist did an absolutely beautiful job of a rendition of a dream that I had, thinking that with kids of all ethnicities, all races, playing together, being happy. And my dream was that we will do the same thing as adults and kids, that we are going to work together, play together, laugh together, get a little ticked off together, and get back on case, all black on. Anyway, please go down by the City Hall on the 3rd Street side, and you'll see the mural. We want to also thank you for the 4th of July parade, and I want to call out a big shout out to Pat again, who I would call her the candy lady. We tried behind and having enough candy for the kids, and there were thousands of people out there, and the kids were there, and they ran out to get candy. And so we know we have to buy more candy next year, and it's a lovely, for the parents, I hope their teeth are okay. But it's one day. A silent walk we do on the 3rd Sunday of every month, and we had to cancel one because of the air quality, the last one. And we will be back doing silent walk, a meditative walk, and join us 3rd Sunday at 3 o'clock and at Millennium Park. The other thing that we've been doing this summer, we've been busy. We're at the farmer's market 2 Saturdays there, and so thank you for shopping first, and also for stopping by our booth. And we have Wednesday morning at 9 o'clock, we gather on A Street, first right in from A at Morse Coffee Company. And it's just drop in and sit down. They've given us a room in the back. You can come and sit there, talk about the garden, talk about the race, talk about whatever, but the community comes together, and it's a lovely time. And thank you again for your support. I wanted to say a big thing that I want to share is that we gave out two $2,000 scholarships this year. Thank you. And Terri and Phil are here from the part of the scholarship committee, but it was really, really great to give a student, Nandita Kumar, from Lake Oswego High School and Naya Coleman from Lake Ridge. They're both in college this fall, and we will look to give more scholarships next year. So if you have an extra dollar or so and want to give a little bit to a young person who's trying to get the higher education, please do that. And you can just go to our website. There's a donate button and just say scholarship, and we will take it. Okay, so thank you, and thank you to all the volunteers who've kept us running. And with that, I'm going to call Terri Kramer so she can introduce our speaker for tonight.
Thank you, Willie. So tonight we have Bruce Poinsette with us. Bruce is a writer and community organizer whose work is primarily based in the Portland Metro area. He hosts the YouTube series, The Blacktastic Adventure, a virtual exploration of Oregon's Black diaspora, and also the Bruce Poinsette Show on the Numbers FM. A former reporter for the Scanner News Group, his writing has also appeared in the Oregonian, Street Roots, Oregon Humanities, and Eater PDX, as well as projects such as the Mercatus Collective and the Urban League of Portland's State of Black Oregon 2015. Poinsette teaches writing and journalism with local nonprofits and will be offering a social justice storytelling workshop series through literary arts for students ages 14 to 18, starting this Saturday. If you want to learn more about this, he'll be happy to answer questions after our meeting tonight. And we'll also post a link in the chat for those tuning in online. Finally, Bruce Poinsette is a class of 2007 graduate of Lake Oswego High School, and his experience heavily motivates the work he does with Respond to Racism, including with our Youth Empowerment Committee. So please help me welcome Bruce Poinsette.
Good evening, everyone. It's been so long since I've been up here. First off, I want to thank you all for being here. Thank all of you who are watching right now online. This is actually an emotional project I'm sharing tonight. As mentioned before, I graduated class of 2007 from Lake Oswego High School. I've seen what LOs look like, before there was an LO for love or Respond to Racism. I've seen on one hand that we've made a lot of progress, but also I've seen that this is not, and I want to emphasize this is not the time for a victory lap in this city. When it comes to families of color in Lake Oswego, when it comes to youth in these schools, people are still very much going through it. And it's very isolating in a place like this. As you'll see in this video compilation that I'll be showing you tonight, Life After the Bubble, there's a lot of intersections of not just racism, but classism that exist in Lake Oswego. There's a lot of, again, when you are just growing up here, I know this from my own experience, I know this from talking with students of color before me, talking with students of color after me. It's isolating because when you have access to all the privileges, the proximity to power in Lake Oswego, no one feels sorry for you. No one's coming to save you. So you fight these fights on your own. And I brought something tonight because I recently saw a program, hopefully this is getting captured on the video, to a program for the funeral of, or I should say the celebration of life of Marquise Royster. Marquise was a Lake Ridge High School standout, a brother to two younger siblings, just a cherished, a great young man. Unfortunately, that's not how I got to know his story. I got to know when I was working at the Scanner in which is a historically Black newspaper in Portland in 2012. At that time, Marquise was going to Lake Oswego High School, where his teammates were calling him the N-word on Twitter. And then the superintendent, Bruce Poinsette at the time, went and made a statement saying that, this isn't our community. And that set me off. I ended up doing an editorial that got picked up by the Oregonian, actually ended up having me, I got invited to speak at this church following that. But anyways, Marquise then transferred to Lake Ridge, where, among other incidents, he was literally assaulted by an assistant coach during practice. The family fought, sued the district, got a settlement. And while on one way it's inspiring to see people take on these structures of power, it's also was one of the things that was a motivating factor for me for later getting into this work, which is that you get tired of seeing people having to fight these fights alone, whether it be as students, whether it be as, again, families of color. At the celebration of life, something that really struck me was just how, there's a period where people come up to share stories about the person that's been lost. And the two big prevailing themes were, one, Marquise's role as just a protector for both his siblings, for his friends, for those around him, and just what he took on because he stepped up to the plate to do that, while it could have easily just said, hey, I could focus on football. The other thing was the weight that he took on by doing all that. Some that people know, most that people probably didn't know. And they talked heavily about his time, those 4 years in the Lake Oswego high schools. Most people, they were so horrified by the stories still after the fact that they didn't want to mention LO by name. There's only a pastor who happened to be sitting behind me who finally just said, I think what a lot of people were thinking is just like, what happened to him was evil. And yet, a lot of us, we watched. We watched as we've watched other incidents like this happen. We've watched other incidents happen since. And when I think about the point of this series tonight, Life After the Bubble, it features interviews with former students ranging from the class of 2006 to the class of 2021, talking about their experiences in Lake Oswego high schools, their experiences in LO. And a lot of it there's a lot of horror stories, but this is not just me coming out here to trot out people's trauma for an audience. There's also stories of the spaces people created in spite of that. The community, often students created in spite of that, in a place like this, isolated under duress. And it's been, in addition to a point of recenter, or in addition to being something to recenter some of the work we're doing, it's also, it's had me thinking a lot, because for this organization, I've done student panels, I've done student work, and it is in earnest, it is sincere. But after a while, when the students start asking you, so what has changed? And you only have but so much to really give them. They have younger siblings still going through it in school, and you only have so much to tell them. And you feel that guilt, that lament for saying, have I just put these kids in harm's way with no plan? But how can I do better? So I was asked by the LO Review what the objectives were for this film, for this series, because in addition to what we're showing tonight, there will also be, all of the interviews will be released in their entirety starting in October. But it's two things. First, I want current students of color and their families to be able to see themselves, see people who've gone through what they've gone through, hear stories of how people, again, created space, created community, fought back in spite of it all. And second, I want those of us who are doing this work when it comes to equity, when it comes to anti-racism, when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, whatever you want to call it, that we take on a sense of urgency that maybe we've lost a little bit. And we center the needs of students and families of color who are most affected by the racism in this city, in our work, in the way we shape our work, in the way we design our work. So our remarks were going to be a little shorter, but you get into, like I said, it's a little bit it's more emotional than I had planned going through these interviews, going back, doing edits, even just putting a little compilation together tonight. But I really want us to think about that. I need people to listen. I need people to, I'm just gonna reiterate what I said at the beginning. This is not the time for a victory lap in this city. The stakes are too high. So with that, I'm gonna move into the film. I mentioned a social justice writing workshop earlier. I'll talk some more about that later, but especially for students who might be here or might be tuning in, this is also an opportunity to learn more about the work. But with that, I believe my next slide. Yes, with that, we will start the video.
We are all the direct stories of these major and easy to write about concepts of, okay, white flight happens, and then you get gentrification, which is right return, and then you have these students or these kids who don't really know what's going on. High school, I'm walking across 43 at 5:30 in the morning to get on 35 to get to De La Salle in North Portland. And that's when I really started it clicking with things. I'm literally watching property values sort of decrease as you come out of the trees, right, that we take for granted, into cities, and then apartment buildings, they get smaller and smaller. And now I'm on Denver Street from Ash and Oswego, I'm these are different realities. And I think that ninth grade year, leaving Lake Oswego and going to De La Salle in my Birkenstocks and my Bostons, and we're roasting me, what are those? And my relationship to place really is a conversation, right? As a whole, what does place mean? And how does it develop or determine who we become?
The thing that is always stuck in my memory as being a very defining theme of my experience through junior high and high school was the fact that 9/11 happened when we were in 7th grade. It was start of the school year. And then the Iraq war happening, and just the onslaught of sort of vulgar media that teenagers really just got force fed at that time, whether it was just the simple hyper patriotism of Team America to caricatures of like Middle Eastern people in like cartoons and media. A lot of that came back to like my experience of being like one of very, very, very few Middle Eastern kids at Lake Oswego High School. And just like, like anytime something would happen in the news and you'd get like a little spike of talk about the Middle East in any sense, was like something that I would hear about. And whether like it's, the experience of like taunts and slurs from your classmates, or like being expected to be a expert or like a token spokesperson by your teachers. It's like it's like on the one hand, it's like, wait, am I supposed to be hated for this, or am I an expert on this? And you're supposed to like respect me for it. And there's like a wild push and pull of that. And like for me, I'm like, well, I grew up I grew up in Mountain Park. I'm born and raised here. What do I know about any of this to any of you? Just being like in a way so totally confused as to how I would become like a face of that for some people. But that that really was like, sure, it wasn't every day, but it's definitely, it was one of those things where like looking back on it, it's like, oh yeah, I felt that a lot.
In LESS, when we start like in middle school, when you start learning about racism, and there's like a racist occurrence in a book to someone of your race, and then suddenly you see all the white kids turn their heads towards you. And it's like, I can understand, like, yes, that person is of my race, but why are you turning the attention to me? I'm not the character in this book. So why are we all looking at me right now?
In sixth grade, if you were in like a elevated math class or whatever, the one level up in like seventh grade math, whatever that was, they would put you on a bus, like a small bus. And there's a few of us from River Grove that went to Palisades. And then I think Palisades was sort of like the hub. And then, a couple kids from the different schools would go and meet there for the morning math class. And I just remember, and it was a very interesting, congregation of all these kids, because it was like kids from Palisades and Westridge and maybe another school on our side, and then River Grove. And so it was like a mix of all these different kids for the one class. And actually there's kids from, it was either Forest Hills or one of the other schools too, because there was Lake Oswego, kids that would filter into Lake Oswego High School that were in that class. And so that's where I had a couple experiences with a student who didn't want to be in my group. We were assigned like groups, like, hey, everyone, you're A, B, C, D, in your little group, and then everyone who was B went to the B table type of thing. And so we get into these groups, and this one kid, you could bleep out the name, but it was Riley Werner. He was like, I don't want to be in your group, or you're not welcome to be in our group, something of that nature, you dirty Mexican. So for me, I was like, what? I was like, what? And because the kid that he was hanging out with is like brown skin and like black hair, and that was like his friend. And I was like, maybe he was mixed or something. I have no idea. But I was like, bro, like, because I peeped who he's talking with the whole time or whatever. It's like, I don't know what ethnic enclave he's assigned to, but he's not white. And I just remember he was like, I don't want you to be in my group, you dirty Mexican. And I was just like, bro, is this real life? You know what I mean? This is not indirect. This is very direct. And I just remember that being crazy. And I want to say that I told the teacher that, and she was an old teacher. She might have been like in her 60s by then. And I just remember she kind of was like, it just was almost like she might have cared, but she didn't care enough to like, do anything about it. It was like, you're not even really my student, you're from another school. Like, it just seemed messy, or it just wasn't of value of her. Like, she heard the words, the audio went into her ears and her brain processed it. But like the reaction that I got from it was just like, not like sympathy or empathy or care. It was just kind of like, this isn't a problem big enough to justify me, you know, doing anything about it. So that was one experience that was more of like direct side for me, you know, and then at that point, like all I could think of when that happened was like I'm not even Mexican.
When I was younger, maybe more so, it was just like ambiguous brown, where they didn't really even know what I was. And so like most of the time I'd be getting that, what are you? And then they'd say like, there'd be like, kids would be like, call me Mexican, like it would be a diss. Like that shit never made any sense to me. Or Chinese. And it would be like, there's like these weird, there's like the brown cultures that the white people are most comfortable being afraid, openly afraid of, or what? But like, that's not a diss. Like the homie's Chinese, the homie's Mexican. What is this? You know? And but they were just grasping at straws. And then, you know, for somebody who didn't grow up with brown people in my immediate family, that shit was even more confusing for me, you know? Because I'm like, well, you know, I'm Anthony.
Every stage of my life, elementary, middle, high school, would want me to choose. You know what I mean? And I was never like enough in terms of identity. And then, I mean, the level of like they made sure I knew it. You know what I mean? Like, it was crazy too, because it ended up kind of damaging me. I like straightened my hair, I relaxed my hair, I begged my mom to like perm my hair straight. And she, after like, you know, years of saying I'll never do that, did it, because I was like at the like in a really scary place mentally. And it was stupid, like over my hair, because people were, you know, grabbing it and like cutting it with scissors during school and stuff. And like I don't know, other things, like they would put like bugs in my hair. And then like, cause you know, I have like Afro texture and shit just hangs in there. You know what I mean? And so like I would have to find them later, or people put like forks in my hair and I have to find them. So I told her, I was like sobbing. I was like, people are, you know, cutting my hair. People are, you know, putting shit in my hair, mom. Like, and she decided to straighten it. And it's like, she then fell to that too. You know what I mean? Like she then fell to the people in my life also making it like horrible to be Black. You know what I mean? It's never. She was an anthropology culture major. Like she was so hard on being like yourself. You were beautiful, you know. But when she heard that, it just hurt us both so bad. And it ruined my hair. I mean, now it's like growing back healthy, but for years it was, you know, fucking straight and dry. And honestly, like I'm going into it a lot. But the point is like it ruined me. I changed myself physically. I tried to light my skin. Nasty shit. But at the beginning of my senior year or freshman year, I think I realized like I had to like slow down on that, you know what I mean? And like kind of realize, but that was hard. Like it was finding identity before then and realizing that it was okay to have curly hair and that the people putting shit in my hair was their problem. And like all that traumatic shit, you know what I mean, wasn't on me.
You know, because you would get it even from your friends, and it's like, well, do you guys just like not have any other jokes, or like, you know, one of the other things that I was thinking about is like, you know, it is one thing to like joke about it with your friends and have that sort of like dark humor, and you know, you can for the most part tell the folks for whom like, yeah, it is a joke, but at the end of the day, those jokes really do become grating. And when it's very one note and happens so constantly, I mean, like you and I had some friends in high school for whom like it felt like the joke never ended. And it's like, they're really smart people, but it just, you know, you get sick of it. You really get sick of it because they also didn't have a perspective of when to give up, or, you know, the harm that their words can cause, and what those things mean. It's like these are people that even to this day I still consider my friends. Like I bear them no ill will for that, but it's like You could have maybe had like a little bit more empathy.
In sophomore year, sophomore high school history class with Mr. Moore. It was Cinco de Mayo, and one of his students was near the front of class. He was giving a speech, and he was kind of like well liked by Mr. Moore. It was kind of like a little bit of a teacher's pet. I'm not even saying that to be facetious, but it was kind of true. So he was letting him like have the floor up front, and Nick was the person was wearing sombrero, and it was Cinco de Mayo, and the person wasn't Hispanic or whatever, and like Nick was just giving a speech just like normal, and then the bell rings, and then everyone just files out about to leave. And Mr. Moore said, class dismissed, see ya, and he said, see ya, El Mico. And I just like sit there and I just say like under my breath, just real quick, I was like, that's racist. And like, I was just packing up my bags, and like, right as I say that, like both of them lightning, Mr. Moore yells, hey, come see me after class. And I was like, oh shit. Like, and my friend Brandon Grubb was sitting right across from me. I looked at him, he's like, are you okay? I was like, it was like almost like, do you want me to stay sort of thing? I was like, no, let's go sort of. But the whole thing transpired really poorly after that. So I, just kind of sitting there, grabbing my things, and he's like standing there next to the door. Pretty much most people have left. He just gets up, literally about 2 or 3 inches from my face, and was like, you don't ever talk like that in front of me, in front of my class. You don't ever call me a racist. And I was like, I didn't call you racist. I said, what you said was racist. I said, oh, that's racist. And he was like, you don't ever call me a racist. And he repeated that line like a few times, and I literally repeated the line, I didn't call you racist. I said, what you said was racist. And literally that was like 2 or 3 exchanges, but I remember 2 specific things, that he was very, very close, and that when I looked down, like his lip was like quivering hard. He was like very, very upset. And like, apparently when I said that when I was like, oh, that's racist, like that triggered him really hard, because I just said it kind of under my breath. I didn't say it very loud. Everyone was like leaving the class. I didn't think most people heard it. And then like, I remember when I said it, it was like, you go to the doctor and like they hit your knee, like reflex. It was literally like so reflexive. There's nothing I could have done. I was like, because he said it as a joke, see you later, El Mico. And I was like, oh, it's racist. I was like, literally, I couldn't avoid it. But it was just like, he was saying it so off the cuff, that I was just saying it so off the cuff. And then he just said, see me later after class, like right away. And so I was like, oh, damn, really struck a nerve. And so the lip quivering, all that. I just remember leaving the class after that. My friend was waiting after me and kind of just being normal. And then 2 or 3 days later, my mom and my sister like tell me, they're like, oh yeah, we met up with your teacher and the vice principal, which was at times Mr. Park. I was just like, oh, Mr. Park and Mr. Moore. And then my sister went on, and I was not included in the conversation. And they just came to the conclusion, or like basically the logical like answer, that like we're both very sensitive people, and that like we're very I guess you could say outspoken. But this word sensitive was used very, very often. I was like, oh, he's sensitive, I'm sensitive. That's why but they totally didn't get the full picture. I wasn't even there. But so but at that point, Mr. Moore was just like very, very like on guard, very nice to the overwhelmingly nice. We had already had not a terrible relationship going on. We were pretty decent, pretty talkative. But I think like that just randomly struck a nerve for whatever reason. He was just like kind of bothered by it. Like he was, I remember just being like, dude, I barely even like, I like almost whispered. I almost didn't even say it just because it was so quiet. But the whole idea was like, what he said was kind of weird. And Nick is, I'm not gonna say the last, like give the person away, but he's not Hispanic, right? He's white. So him wearing that and kind of like being declarative like in front of class like that, it was kind of a little weird. The optics on it were weird. Like nowadays it'd be a little weird, just because it wasn't as like, this wasn't trying to be like super, it's not like trying to be respectful kind of thing. So the whole idea of it was like, oh, this is already kind of weird this person I was doing this weird kind of thing, and the teacher's just kind of, just being fine with it. And then he just says that thing. So I was just like, that was like the cherry on top. So the whole idea was a little weird. And then the whole year goes by pretty fine. Mr. Moore is super nice to me. And then I see him like a few times outside of school because he's super like, he's into movies and a few other things. So I see like Lord of the Rings like release or something like that. I see like the Matrix sequel release, something like that, like at the local Tiger Theater. And he was nice. He's just normal after that. But like a little over nice, just I think to make up for it, or just to like kind of have good like optics on it. But overall, like I always didn't have like fully like great like perspective on like him as a teacher up until that, and then that kind of like a little bit confirmed it. And then in general, yeah, the response was weird. Nowadays, like I would have liked, the student would probably be more like involved in that, but they probably wouldn't be involved in the conversation just because they want to keep it with adults. And I get that to some degree, but honestly, like looking back on it, I like kind of retorted a little bit to my mom and my sister. I didn't want to like tear into them about it, obviously, right? In retrospect, but the whole idea was like, man, I really should have been included on it. That perspective was weird. I know the whole story. I have like very, very clear memory on it, but like almost say a few things. Like, we're in a conversation. So it's really like a case where like in general nowadays, the optics on it would be totally different. But that was more normalized back then. Nowadays, people wouldn't even say anything. Or back then, people wouldn't even say anything. So
senior year, I was in leadership class, and I remember the junior class was picking a theme for the winter formal dance or something. They were in charge of it, and they picked the theme Jungle Fever, and nobody knew. I guess nobody knew, like whoever the Miss Brown or whatever was the leadership teacher, and she like didn't know that the term had any other kind of she thought it, I don't know what the fuck she thought it was, because I was like, and then I called it out, but it wasn't until after they had gotten all this shit printed, like the invitations and all this stuff, and I was like, what is this? Like, what, you don't know like what the connotation with this or anything? She's like, oh, I think I know. It's like, I'm like, she's like, it's that Spike Lee movie about the guy who delivers pizza, and I was like, no. And they eventually like reluctantly like I think changed it to something. I don't remember what the fuck it was, but they changed it. But like they made me feel like I was fucking weird for just like pointing it out, that I'm like, you're an adult, like you were like well into your 50s, like you should know like this thing. But it was like a lot of this. It was, I don't know. It was just a very white-centered like point of view.
A school counselor came in and ripped me out of special ed to get me to like a meeting with 2 other white kids, where they basically just tore me down the entire time. And they called my mom because I was sobbing, and my mom came, and in front of the 2 kids, they told my mom that I should go to a Title IX school, that I need to be in inner city, somewhere where people look like me. And basically calling me poor and Black, if you know what I mean. And like telling me to my face and my mom's face that I just do not belong. And that was like really, really hard. In front of like 2 kids too. Like it was the weirdest probably I don't know, experience I've ever had. And I think my mom ended up getting her like investigated and fired or something like that, because she wears it on her sleeve to like this day. But it like really shook me. And she would always say things like about my hair, and accuse me of like stealing. And like this sounds crazy, but I guarantee, I like swear to God this happened, and nobody ever believes me except for like my mom, because she's like seen it. But she would give all the kids candy, and then she would skip me and at the end of the day, give me a piece of black licorice. That is literally, I don't know why I said that first person. That is literally like something I have eyewitnesses to. And like, I was like maybe 6 and 7 when that was happening. And it's just like, wow. It's kind of funny, but every time I got my hair braided, that was like my 3-month therapy session with everybody who looked like me and my family, man. Like, I swear to God, I would be like excited to go get my hair done because it'd be a salon full of aunties, man. And they love me. I love them. But that was basically it. I could not find, kind of like you said at the beginning, I could not find a community in like the Northeast or anywhere other than where they did my hair that I could really like relate to, or that they would even kind of like accept me as.
I really think I formed BSU out of a need to create that space, like that safe space for not only myself, but in thinking about, I've got a younger sister that's about 4 years behind me, and just imagining her navigating social circles the same way that I did, not having that space where she could engage with her Black peers or engage with non-white peers, and then talk through some of those challenges of like being the only Black kid in the class, or what do you do when you're in a car full of your white friends and they all want to say the N-word. Like, we needed those conversations in those spaces as a kid, and a safe space to do that. And so that was a big push for me to start the BSU. I also felt like at the time there was a Latino student union, and I think there was a Gay Straight Alliance, and like a Jewish student union. And it felt weird to me that as traditional, culturally traditional our community is, that we didn't have another one, or we didn't have any sort of multicultural anything. So I wanted to get that started. I just felt like it was necessary. Rooted in tradition, like it's part of our culture, right? Like we got this here. So it took some promotion. I think I had to like market the club to get an advisor to like sign off on it. But I did have a vice principal at the time, was amazing, and he was super into the idea of creating a student union to help advise it. Unfortunately, when he left, that was the challenge the next year, was like finding another advisor to take it over. My political action seminar teacher agreed to help advise, and honestly, there wasn't like any structural things that I got from them. Like, it's just so that we could be in the yearbook per se. Majority of the meetings we had at my house, just because I think we had one meeting at school and everyone was like, this is not a safe space to talk. So I was like, okay, we're gonna move the meetings to my house, and my mom will make dinner. So we started doing meetings at my house, dinner, and I think initially my goal was to like be more of like a committee or a council. Like, I wanted to enact change, but what the BSU morphed into really was therapy space for us to get together and have a meal together and talk through the challenges and the difficulties of navigating high school as a Black kid in predominantly white spaces. And the camaraderie I found through that was just amazing. Like, I really made some really good connections from that group that are lifelong to me. And I think knowing that other teenagers were experiencing really similar things as me allowed me to feel a little bit safer in my spaces, and allowed me to breathe a little bit and sleep a little bit more at night. I think I was really struggling with feeling isolated like my junior and senior year, and I think that is just a normal feeling of being a teenager, going through like emotions and friendships, relationships together. It's like a very hormonally changing time, right? So you're feeling these really big things all the time, not knowing how to process them. So having that space really, it created that sense of safety. And I saw the way that it created some safety for others in the group too. And I just wanted to continue to foster that space. create safety?
So for me, color was a way that I could indirectly just be like, this may sound a little bad, but like, look at how you guys have affected all these other people, all these students of color, and you guys just all brush over it. It was kind of my way of just like indirectly writing to Lake Oswego students, Lake Oswego teachers, everything. So I was interested in starting a color again for that reason, just to have this outlet almost to share my thoughts without having to like deal with, I would say, the repercussions of when you actually confront a white person and they start getting super defensive, like, I'm not racist, I just, and they start stammering and trying to come up with bullshit excuses as to why they're not actually racist. And so I did it with two of my friends who I know who are also great writers and also passionate, Serena Lump and Cameron Azuka. And we worked together to bring this magazine back. And we published one issue before life got its hold on us again. But I would say I'm very proud of that issue and the work we put into it, because all three of us did end up writing very personal stories of being students of color in LOSD, that I think that is one of my more impactful pieces I've ever released, just because I feel like people started to understand that, like, oh, these stories of racism aren't just things you hear on the news or things that you kind of know about, but people you know are experiencing it as well, which I like because it didn't require me having to deal with directly talking to someone and defending my right to exist in Lake Oswego. I would honestly say the responses are like positive and negative to a certain degree, because I would say a lot of the people that did end up reaching out, they were like, we really love your writing, like, we really support what you said. But then it was like, how much do they actually support me? Because we ended up wanting to share our, like, expand our audience. And there was actually a LO administration that was like, oh, we're willing to share it. And we were like, okay. So we sent them the link and we were like, here, we finished editing all the color and we actually published it. Like, we would love if you would share it with the community. And then we started getting a little bit of like BS excuses of why they couldn't. Because then they were like, oh, like there's curse words on the cover, like it's not appropriate. So then we were like, Serena actually went back and took the time to unpublish the work, go back in and censor the curse words and then republish it, only for us to then get a real response of why they didn't want to share it. And it's because we used the term ACAB, which the school just seemed, the administration just saw as so offensive and so controversial. And I thought this was honestly a little offensive, because they said, how do you feel using the term ACAB, something that I see like gangsters and pubs use? Which then I was like, why are we being compared to gangsters and pubs now? Like, communities, like communities of color that are using ACAB are because people like them are getting wrongfully arrested, killed, hurt by cops. But it's suddenly wrong for us to say that this institution is flawed and that they're bad. And suddenly we're gangsters for doing so.
From what I remember, it seemed like there was two waves of the district trying to respond or at least bring some sort of community discussion about SROs. And I remember being part of like a focus group where they were having, in my case, students talk about their views on SROs being in schools, but they also had focus groups with parents, admin, maybe community members as well. And I don't trust people with guns. I don't want guns or, weapons in my presence. So I just would always avoid them when I see, officers in the halls. And I wasn't worried about retaliation against myself. But it would be, again, like I sort of mentioned earlier, it's like more worrying about people like my brother. And I remember that focus group, and it was just me and two other buddies, and we were all on the same page. We're like, we do not want officers and like armed people around us, and mentioning how it's like, of course, you're going to have problems that we see elsewhere with police with, you know, targeting Black and brown people. I don't know why you want to instill fear in a learning environment, because that seems counterproductive. But I just remember being really frustrated when the district's whole report came out afterwards, where they were showing the different comments made by students versus parents versus community members in admin. And I remember there was a quote from some admin who was like belittling the students' responses and saying essentially like, oh, that, you know, they shouldn't matter because, oh, you know, they're kids. And, you know, we have their safety at heart and, you know, their best interests at heart. I'm like, oh my God. It wasn't an admin. It was like either a parent or a community member who said that. And I'm like, you're not the one in the building with people with guns. How do you think you have the authority here to, you know, say that and just, you know, just diss the perspectives of the people who are going to be most affected by their presence. And then I also remember the district saying like, oh, well, we also want to keep in mind, you know, in light of, you know, some of the student criticism about cops being in schools, by remembering that it was students who demanded that SROs be present after, you know, the Parkland shooting, because everybody's worried about school shootings. And that's understandable to be scared about school shootings, but just like, we've seen so many cases of school shootings where the police officers at the school are not effective and they just stand there or they run away or whatnot. So it was just bogus. And it seemed like they had these listening sessions, but they didn't want to deal with anything that they heard when it came to things that conflicted with their, you know, status quo. But yeah, that really pissed me off reading, you know, a community member statement that's essentially dissing the perspectives and whatnot of the people who are actually going to be in the building with the people with the gun. So I think it's just, I don't know, it's bogus, and I don't think they're going to try to remove SROs at any time soon.
I mean, on the topic of SROs, it was, I think over spring of 2021, where I sat down for, I think maybe an hour or 2 hours with like third-party representatives who were working with the school board to talk about, it was like one of those situations where they hire outside people and then get all of the student data that shows very clearly how the student body feels about something, but then they also consult parents who have like misinformation, where at least in this scenario, it was like talking about SROs and the broad student perspective from both like BIPOC students and students with disabilities was that they don't feel safe. They have had uncomfortable or fearful interactions with the school police officer. And then the same third-party people talk to the parents of students and they say, no, I think that the school is safer with this police officer. I think that if there was a school shooting, he would protect them, or some kind of argument about, again, the perpetuation of like violence and how a good guy with a gun could stop a bad guy with a gun, where when we had probably one of the most severe like school shooter threats while I was in high school, it was because it was an off-duty cop who didn't sign in through the high school registration system. Someone saw him with his gun in the building, told the front office they had an entire lockdown of the building while he was supposed to be there for a classroom lecture and discussion with one of the social studies teachers, where it's like, in that scenario, also the school resource officer who was supposed to be on call had his kidney stones removed and was in the hospital. So even if we were going along the argument that cops stop school shootings, which they don't, that wasn't even a good example. But in this hyper vigilant scenario where somehow mainly white parents are under the impression that they both are safe and also are under the threat of violence, it seems like the school board just put together another task force and said, okay, we'll consider removing school resource officers now that we've collected information from actually hundreds of students across the district who said that they didn't support it, felt literally unsafe, under duress, and also at the same time were forced to continue to go to school in this unsafe environment where it's just it's not even necessarily bureaucracy, but it's just kind of like white comfort in many cases where I think, at least in other spaces that I've been in outside of Lake Oswego, whether it was now in college or in Peekskill or while I was in boarding school, it just seems like that's a recurring theme that no longer surprises me. And I think that that's also something that people talk about often as far as you always hope that you're going to be surprised, or you hope that you are giving someone the opportunity to really learn from when you're perhaps calling someone in or calling an action out and taking the time and empathy to connect over something and educate, but then you just feel so many of these washing moments where, oh, you just proved me right. You just affirmed that you would rather stand with white unity over my genuine concerns for health, safety, my ability to live, other human rights that just are able to be ignored because it's an inconvenience.
Let's talk about racism, but let's not talk about politics because we don't want to alienate these people. And it's you're so interested in not alienating people who are actively causing us harm, and you're not making any type of effort to make us feel good at all. And it's just that time-old story of what about us? Where's all this? Why aren't you worried about us? Why do we have to do all this work to make people who are hurting us feel better when no one, not even you, who's supposedly on our side, is doing anything to make us feel not that bad?
It became especially clear from working with Next Up and also just doing some reflection work is how a lot of the sort of projects that the district or administration try to get me and some of my peers to be involved in was really just co-optation. Yeah, and it's just all that free labor stuff. But yeah, I think if I was to apply more of the lessons that I learned from Next Up and other political organizing, it was just to be more critical. I think we could have laid it on a bit thicker in terms of criticism and pointing out where the admin are going wrong and point out be more obvious in terms of why their intentions are misguided in many cases. Because first of all, we were asked by the district to be there, and we were the ones who were willing to show up, after school hours to do this work. And so if these are all the voices they're getting, we might as well, you know, be the ones to point out, you know, how they could improve, because they're not gonna find people who really want to spend time out of school doing this work otherwise.
I don't even know how to describe it, but I know that like in my last year there, when the administration was maybe attempting to take steps to make things better, I think I came out of that feeling very used and confused and kind of just like, what was that? Like, what just happened? Because I and other students, we put in a lot of effort for things. It's hard, bro. Like, I'm thinking about it now and I can't even get a grasp on it. And I think part of it is because I've pushed it so far to the recesses of my memory. But yeah, I feel like at times we were kind of, I don't even know the word. It just kind of, yeah, no, used and propped up. I can think of one instance, someone who I will not name. It's not a big deal or anything, but a teacher who came up to me one time and started asking me all of these questions about race and like was really interested in stuff. But when I think back to it, I get a little bit off put because I'm like, I was like a 16-year-old kid. I don't necessarily feel like I should have been the one that you're coming to with this stuff. I feel like a lot of times the children of color, emphasis on children, we were treated like adults. And I don't appreciate that because we weren't really given the same chance to stumble around and figure ourselves out.
I love having the platform and the ability to express and have my voice heard by the community. I love the fact that I've had channels and avenues that allow me to put on forums and create the student union and continue to highlight different race problems in our community. I think the piece that I struggled with, and I didn't struggle with it until after the fact, was the educational, like the training, the teaching aspect of it. I wasn't on a lowest salary, but somehow I helped facilitate racial equity trainings and like brought in speakers to talk about like race in Oregon, like those kinds of things. I was so passionate as a kid that I wanted to do these things as a teenager, that I wanted to do these things. But that wasn't my, like that shouldn't have been, there's needed to have been a say, I love this energy. How can we take this and help create this in a more structured way, in a way that is long-term? So it's not just a one-off from an excited kid in the class of 2017 that got to put on a couple events. It's no recurring. You have the civil rights attorney of Oregon coming to do these presentations every year for these economic classes. Like that's what needed to happen. And I think that's where us as a community, we're losing the momentum, and we want to highlight these teenagers and highlight the voices that are the front lines, because teenagers are often the front lines of this experience. But we're not taking the tangibles from what they're saying and moving on them. That's the piece that I'm really struggling with, is that, like, Bruce, I feel like we have had this conversation for years. Like we've been talking about these things for years, and it's great. I want to keep the conversation alive, but how do we move the needle where we're actually making a tangible change?
And it's wild when I've seen like people from like Oswego in like recent years that are younger, that are super confident, or that like rep Lake Oswego, and I'm like, what? How do you pull this off? I'm like, oh, well, there's a factor that changes it, but you know, it's just like that's not something that Black or brown person would be bragging about in any context.
I never, when there's an opportunity to mention, you know, where I'm from or where I grew up at, you know, I never will say, you know, where I was from or where I grew up at, unless someone asked me directly. You know, it's one of those things where it's like, you know, I had, you know, not an incredible amount of trauma, but just enough trauma where it's like, you know, I don't want to be associated with that. I hate telling people like, oh, I'm from Lake Oswego, because in my soul, like I'm not, you know what I mean? Like that just comes with too much baggage that I don't deserve.
So, among other things, this was up. Or wait. Okay, yeah, there we go. So, one of the things with the choice of interviewees with this series, why I wanted to highlight the different range of, again, we're going from class of 2006 to class of 21. Got students, many of whom graduated from, some who've even just passed through, because oftentimes those stories get lost. But you see people why they have to get out of LO schools. That's a big part of what we're talking about and what the work we're doing is. But also I wanted to highlight, again, this is just a little compilation of stories. You don't get to highlight all the different professions represented, different, you know, experiences. David Lee was talking about his experience with Mr. Moore, oddly enough, who happened to be my coach back in the day, but that's another story as well. His group of mostly Asian friends, they were instrumental in starting the film studies class at Lake Oswego High School. Literally, the projects from their senior year inspired Mr. McNeil to, that next year, actually create it just from their enthusiasm, the amount of work they put into it. Cameron Leland and Daniel Nsigimana, who are on there, they're part of that first Black student union at Lake Oswego High School. I had to meet at Cameron's house because it wasn't safe to meet in the school. That's a story I've heard from BSUs in recent years, both at Lake Oswego High School and at Lake Ridge, again, to this day. Even Troy Douglas, who was the last person on there, talking about why he doesn't really like to say he's from Lake Oswego. His store, Cultural Blends, or his brand Cultural Blends, actually has 2 stores in Portland now. It's an institution around not just apparel, but literally bringing cultures together. He'll tell you, and you can watch it in the interview when we drop it, that this Lake Oswego experience was very much instrumental in that. I believe, in fact, yeah, I do have a Cultural Blend sticker, if that gets on the camera here for the meeting, literally on my computer. But I share all that, again, to share that I was thinking about doing this, and as the person who's done, again, these student panels, who's had to rethink about how do we use these platforms to be more active? What I really, really wanted current students to, again, see those who've been where they've been, who created in spite of, who created under that duress. So the next part of our program, I want to do a little discussion. It's not going to get, usually when I do these, I have several very detailed discussion questions, all kinds of follow-ups, but we're going to keep it light today. So in your, I guess with 3 or 4 people around you, and if you're online, I'm not sure what the total number is, but maybe if you do breakout groups of 4 or 5, maybe. And in that, I want you to, 1, introduce yourselves. We are, after all, also building community here. And just share your name, your pronouns, and have you been to a Respond to Racism meeting before? If so, how long have you been coming? And if you're new, welcome. And then with the discussion questions, we just got two. One, what is a story from the video that resonated with you the most and why? And two, do you know any resources, especially local, for youth of color in predominantly white communities? And if so, please share with the group. And I want to focus on those resources part because that is a big part of how people get through. I know certain things that my parents connected with me with, whether it be rites of passage, whether it be just community outside of LO for the most part, was instrumental for me and just as I look back and surviving. I know that in a lot of these interviews, a lot of these former students talk about whether it was finding passion or finding a community in these groups that they created, or whether it was certain extracurricular activities that they were able to get lost in to very honestly make the day-to-day school life tolerable, not even tolerable, but just enough to get through. That's a big part. So when we talk about these resources, that's why I asked about that. That's why I want us to share this with each other and pass them on and make sure they actually get to the people who need them the most. And before I let you go into breakout groups, I imagine we're still setting up as well. So I'll filibuster a little bit with a couple of resources through our organization, specifically youth-based. One is our Youth Empowerment Committee, as a student-led group working out of, we have students in both high schools right now. Their Club Rush is getting started, so this is prime time if you're a student watching, if you're a parent with students who might be interested. Our YEC, or the Youth Empowerment Committee, is a youth-led group of empowered high school students inspired to disrupt racism within LO. Some of the things they do include exploring identity and lived experiences, working with like-minded individuals and improving leadership skills, seeking knowledge about the past and present history of social justice issues, and discovering strategies to take action while networking and having fun. They meet at the Lake Grove Starbucks, which you can find. We'll also share this information later after as well for those who are just watching. But if you're interested in getting in contact with them, it's at youthempowerment.rtr@gmail.com. They're also on Instagram at RTR _youth. So if you want to get involved with the Youth Empowerment Committee, yeah, that's where you go. Also, we are looking for student columnists. Respond to Racism has a spot in the Lake Oswego Review. We have a column that we've, I want to say for a couple years now, featured student writing, specifically students of color, talking about critical race theory, talking about just using that space to really explore the nuances of race and racism, be it in LO, be it in the world, and helping, not just helping to educate and facilitate conversation in the community, but as you can see here, it's also a paid opportunity because it is professional work. And as someone personally who benefited a lot from having writing opportunities, who had his own LO Review column when I was a student, it's just one way I think we can, again, facilitate conversation, facilitate building something, facilitate professional development, and do all that work at the same time. So you can see some examples of past student columns from just this year, like How Casual Xenophobic Rhetoric is Weaponized Against Chinese Americans by Barbara Chen, who you saw on the compilation video, or Revisionist History is Our Representation by Cameron Izuka, who you also saw on the video. So with that, I'm gonna go back to our discussion questions. Just to reiterate the instructions, if you find basically the 3, 4 3 or 4 people around you. If you're on online, we'll be going to breakout groups. And yeah, again, just introduce yourself. Yeah, so introduce yourself, your name, your pronouns. If you've been to Respond to Racism meeting before, how long have you been coming? And then responding to the 2 discussion questions. What is the story from the video that resonated with you the most and why? And share some resources for youth of color in communities like this. And we will, let's see what the time is. We'll just take about 20 minutes.
Create a question about perhaps a problem in Lake Oswego. My question was, why are there no people of color here? What would you do to find out? I would interview the realtors and find out if there's something. I was pulled into the principal's office, vice principal, Miss Barbie, who said that was a totally inappropriate question. And you change your question and do not do that. Or, I argued, if you don't, you will not graduate. That's, and things haven't changed all that much, but I'm delighted that at least we can talk about it now, and it would no longer be an inappropriate question.
Thank you. So I'll go to that second question about resources. I'm curious if anyone has any they would like to share with the group. I'll start with an organization I am a member of. It's called Imagine Black, who does not just work serving Black community, but leading with a Black queer feminist lens. They do workshops, community building activities, they provide resources. And it's one of the things where, again, I wish, one of the reasons I feel so enthusiastic about it is because it's something that I look at as, at this age of 34, and say, I wish that was there. I was lucky to have some things. I was lucky to be a part of a Black Rites of Passage program called the Bridge Builders, which, funny enough, Bart Fitzgerald, who you saw the first clip in this interview, we're only like a few years apart. And we hadn't met each other until like last year, but that school he went to, De La Salle, was where most of, but many of the people who were in that Rites of Passage program went. So he knows a lot of my Rites of Passage classmates better than I do. And it's funny how even when we all are in the same area, how isolated and disconnected we are. How Anthony, who was also on there, graduated 2 years after me at the same high school. I've actually known of him as both a visual artist and a rapper for like nearly a decade now, and I didn't realize until another person I interviewed connected the 2 of us that we went to the same high school. Because that's that's the reality of, that's the reality of the isolation here. So yeah, to that end, before we go our ways for the evening, does anyone have any resources? Yes. Can we get, where's the mic at? Got a hand in the back.
Thank you for that movie and documentary, Bruce. I'm so happy that I'm here to see it in person. I just want to say that what you saw on that in the documentary is a fraction of the stories. It's a very small percentage of the stories, very, very, very small percentage of the stories. And the lives that have been impacted, the lives that have been taken from us too early, the trauma that people live with in their schools and pass on to multiple generations after, we don't know of. So that is very little. Despite the fact that I don't live in Lake Oswego, I have never birthed children that have gone to Lake Oswego. I live all the way in Hillsborough. I have heard about Lake Oswego. So, and this is not just the story of Lake Oswego, these are the stories of our entire county that is not being heard, seen, or spoken about. I remember when one of the stories that somebody mentioned that old, the word old, and we all laughed. It's actually serious because there are two things to age. Either you age by number or you age by the brain. So majority people forget that it is age can be a huge detriment in progress for the humanity because we have aged in our brain, not just the number. You can be 85 and still kick ass. Oh, I'm sorry. So you can still do that. But if we continue to choose to live with our age and just say, oh, I've lived life. I don't need to learn anymore because I'm done. I have lived for so long. It's not like I don't know. We continue to cause harm because of our inability to accept changes, accept dialogue, listen and act. Just because something is not our reality or we have not experienced or seen doesn't mean it's not happening with others. We have a universal, I think, global culture of denial. Think about it. Across the world, we want to deny that these things exist because we feel that if we put a cover on it, if we deny it, we won't have to accept it. And then how do we live with the guilt and shame of letting it exist in our society? So what did we do about it? So because we don't want to put in that effort, we don't want to live with the guilt and shame, we love to deny it. And this is the result of it. We cannot give back our students their dignity. We cannot give back our children their innocence. No child should have had to experience that. I don't know how we as birthers and parents are two different things. We as adults, how we are letting our children experience that and not saying, how dare we not act? So I think resources in Washington County are few and far between. As a county, we have failed our children. We do not have adequate resources at all, except few and far between. Maybe 1 or 2% of the population has access to resources. Communities of color do not have access to resources. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Just do the thing I do in my classrooms where just look around and wait for it to get uncomfortable and see if someone else volunteers. I think we got one more hand.
I'm not sure if this is a resource for communities of color or for white people, but Dawn mentioned our libraries. And from what I've seen, at least in the last 5, 6, 7 years, our libraries are more intentional about the programs they put on around culture and learning about culture. And the youth librarians are more intentional. And they also are doing more outreach with community groups. Like I say, I'm not sure who that really helps, if it really is a resource for youth of color, but hopefully there's a ripple effect that at some point will create some sort of benefit or at least awareness and understanding. Yes, they absolutely are. Yes.
And I would say, unlike Target, they kept all their Friday information
The library.
Yeah. Good. Phil, can we get the mic to Phil?
I'm the president of the Friends of the Lake Oswego Library. I'm the president of the Friends of the Lake Oswego Library. We have a huge amount of money at our disposal, and we actually pay for a lot of programs that are extra at the library. But the library doesn't have the ability to pay for it themselves. So if anybody wants to come to me with a resource question in terms of what we could possibly give to the library in terms of money for a special project of any kind, I'd be delighted to hear from you.
Awesome. Thank you. I think that's it's a good space to share this final thought, which is often when we do these conversations, we do these panels, and we get to the point of the natural point of, so what are we gonna do? What can we do? And, you know, I often look around and the helplessness kind of feels very visceral, right? You know, not because no one wants to do anything, but because like it is, you know, tackling a culture and atmosphere of racism. It's a daunting task, right? Also, there are people who have to live through it and don't have a choice. So when I think about a place like Lake Oswego, when I think about a place, the amount of resources, the amount of just put out the amount of money that is flowing out here, whether it be with organizations, whether it be with individuals. Like, even if you don't have all the stuff you need to feel like you can be an effective advocate, we can make money move to a lot of places, both here, but then also outside, out to the resources, again, in other cities, other counties that children here, students here, families here end up accessing because it's so isolated. There are the same way we can get creative with a lot of things. The same way I remember in the early RTR years when I was at the Notre Dame Cathedral caught on fire. There was a big story in the LO Review about how everyone came together to raise money for this church across the ocean that didn't need it. I know that we can't fix everything tomorrow. There's too much money out here not to be able to make some real impacts, even in just that area. So I want to thank you all again for joining us this evening. I want to thank everyone online for tuning in. And again, I hope you're listening tonight, and I hope you move on that. And with that, let y'all in here dig into the food. Good night.
Thank you for watching another RTR production of Respond to Racism's monthly community meeting. To find out more information about Respond to Racism and today's meeting, visit www.respondtoracism.org and consider making a donation through our website to support future meetings and community events.